Hello and welcome back. In a previous task, we looked at who will use assessment records and why they will need access to them. But in this one, it's all about the importance of following procedures that relates to how we manage the assessment records. So why have we got to follow the certain procedures that the organisation sets with the way that we manage these records? So what assessment records are we talking about? What information? Well, of course, the assessment plans that we communicate with our learners, the evidence that they're submitting and presenting, along with the feedback that assessors will give to our learners, individual learning plans and action plans. This is really important for particularly those that are doing funded work-based qualifications. You've got learning logs or those that have to track off the job. This is especially important for apprenticeship standards. All of this information needs to be collected and it needs to be managed in a consistent and standard way. That's what we're going to be exploring in this video. So we're not on our own. We do have specific tools for keeping this information managed. For some of us, we are still paper-based. That's perfectly normal. I remember doing my teacher training qualifications where I had 3 lever-arched portfolios. One of them was like the housekeeping. One of them was like all of the completed evidence and completed work against the teaching standards. And then the third folder was the working towards the progress folder, if that makes sense. So yeah, having a folder is sometimes quite normal, paper-based. But we also have a plethora of digital portfolio tools. So virtual learning environment, Moodle, the world's largest and most utilised. And we have something called OneFile that's a subscription-based portfolio management tool. And Smart Assessor is very similar, very much geared to UK qualifications. Google Classroom's very much a COVID era that's continued to be maintained, but these tools can help us manage that information. Now, sometimes training providers will use collaboration tools like Dropbox, OneDrive, Google Drive. They might just put a little folder and have all of the portfolios of each learner that's in a shared drive. It's not the world's most efficient in my opinion, but it happens. And for tracking, well, you've got Excel, of course, Google Sheets, things like Smart Assessor and OneFile. They can have their own tracking tools all built into it, and of course Moodle as well. So why is it important then to have a standardized procedure in the training setting? This is one reason. For data protection, GDPR, General Data Protection Regulations. And if it's all centralised and everybody's following the same thing, then it hopefully will reduce possible data breaches. We've all seen people that have had folders of work and things like that in the boot of the car, or an office that's got paperwork all over the place. If you are using a consistent and standard procedure, then hopefully it will reduce that potential data breach. Some of the time you may be working with some commercially sensitive information. It could be an internal procedure that company X uses, or if you're in a construction site, then a client may have very specific materials or projects that they need to be sharing. You know, all of this is commercially sensitive that we need to keep safe if we're in possession of it. And to summarise, if it's not all over the place and it's centralised, it's just more efficient and easier to protect for data protection. So the awarding bodies themselves have got procedures and guidance about how information is managed for their qualifications. And that can be just for one specific qual, or it could be for a range of different qualifications of the same style. And we do have to ensure that we follow those, because otherwise, if we don't, as a training provider, they can issue sanctions. Let me give you an example for the type of thing that we're referring to. So I deliver and assess quite a lot of the Level 3 award in education and training, and the awarding body require us to save video files of people's microteaches for the purpose of quality assurance and to ensure that we're delivering it in a compliant way. One of the key aspects of the education and training itself is there has to be other practitioners as part of their lessons. So having video evidence helps prove that it's authentic. And if we don't comply with that, then we could be issued sanctions, which obviously no training provider wants. Now, the training provider themselves will have very specific policies, and that could be whether they're paper-based or digital portfolios. So, for example, all the paper-based folders that we work with follow a very strict structure. So the very front is what we call the housekeeping section with the specification, policies and procedures. The middle section contains all of the finished, completed, signed, assessed evidence that's indexed and page numbered. And then right at the back, you've got all the assessment planning and all the non-finished and not quite there assessment evidence. Now, when it comes to digital portfolios, as you know, we use Moodle. So all of our assignments are structured into tasks. Every learner has to complete the task to 100%. You're already quite familiar with this. Another policy that we have is that all feedback must go through Moodle to ensure that there's a full auditable paper trail, and we can do that in the form of feedback files or just put a comment on the task itself. That's one policy. Our feedback likes to contain a consistent structure. We tend to thank people for their submission, share areas of good practice and why it's met the criteria, and if there are any areas of development, we try to clearly articulate what they've got to do, the learner has got to do to complete the task next time. And all of that is to try and keep consistency, so it doesn't matter which assessor that the learner has happened to be assessed by, it should be quite familiar when it comes to reading the feedback. And as I've mentioned previously, how it's stored for us is all on our virtual learning environment, but that can differ from one training organisation to another. Some people do use OneDrive or various other document storage tools, and it's there to ensure that it can be retrieved quite quickly by the people that need to do that. Now, as I'm sure you're familiar with so far, evidence does need to be sampled by the IQA internal quality assurer and of course the external quality assurers from the awarding bodies themselves. They need to be able to quickly and efficiently find what they're looking for, dip in, sample that one bit and then move on. They don't want to be having to spend half an hour looking at one learner's folder to realise that it's all unorganised and they can't find what they're looking for. So it's really critical that it follows a consistent and standard process of how that information is managed and maintained. So another reason why we have to follow a consistent and standardised process in the way that we deal with the information is for progress management, because timely completions is critical. We can't have learners stumbling or procrastinating or whatever. They've got to be able to quickly move on for timely completion. They need to be kept focused, they need to act on the feedbacks given, and they need to meet deadlines. But if they can't find where it is that feedback was given in the first place, then that obviously creates a huge barrier. Assessors ourselves, we will be tracking progress, updating trackers, updating individual learning plans, so we need to be able to quickly have a snapshot overview of all of the submissions to keep everybody else informed and up to date. Sometimes it's important to do some sort of trend analysis with this information. Do our learners get stuck at a very specific point? Is it a consistent theme? I know this probably lends itself more to quality assurance, but nevertheless, if our data and our information follows a consistent structure, it helps us to be able to identify these outliers. Has the teaching that's been done previously been effective? Are they getting that assessment correct? Are they passing first time, or are they struggling? Do we need to report our success rates for our marketing team or whoever? And of course, engagement. If a learner is engaged, as we've looked at in previous assignments, they're more likely to complete and have a better learning experience and learner journey. So thank you very much for making it to the end of the video. We should now have a good overview of why it's important to follow procedures in the way that we manage our assessment evidence. And like always, I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Take care.